Okay, so today we're going to talk about how you can showcase your understanding of shading if you're not very confident with your shading ability. First of all, let's talk about the reasons why you might choose to shade a piece of work that you're working on. With whatever material you're working with, you may choose to showcase shading to add realism to the object, to make it look more three-dimensional than two-dimensional. You might also choose to show shading or to add tone to your work so that you can show where light is hitting the object and where the darker parts of the object are. It can also be used to add more detail to the work as well. However, a lot of people approach visual arts and they look at shading and they think, yeah, I can't do that, that looks really tough. And the truth is it is. Shading or using tone or value in work can be one of the areas which requires quite a bit more practice and time as part of improvement. So, how can you showcase that you understand shading whilst improving your ability to shade? Well, that we can do, and that is easy. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start by choosing some patterns from a selection. Okay, pick your favorite ones. Start by drawing a few boxes on a piece of paper, and all I want you to do is to spend a few minutes by copying those patterns. Don't make any changes to them, just pick your favorite, put them in the boxes, and try and copy them as closely as you can to the original. From there, we're going to take that quite easy activity and we're now going to try and apply a shading concept to it. Frequently in arts, you'll tend to come across tonal gradients or shading bars. Now, these are used by artists as a manner of showcasing their skill and ability, so that you can see with whatever material they're using, they can quite confidently move from a darker part of an object, where the shadows are, to a much lighter part of the object. And generally, these are considered successful when the transition between the dark and the light is smooth. There are subtle steps between when you start to go from dark to light, rather than big jumps. Now, we're going to try and achieve this effect using the patterns that you have selected. So, first up, what you need to do next is to draw a rectangle. To start off with, let's make it easy for ourselves. Let's make it quite a thin rectangle and let's divide it into 3 boxes. And let's label those boxes dark, medium, light. Now, when using patterns and when looking at shading as a concept, there are a few different ways in which we can alter how dark something is. We can adjust the proximity, so how close the shading is next to one another, which in this case translates to how close the patterns are to one another. We can adjust the pressure we are applying with our pencil or whatever material we're using. This won't always work. If you're using a pen, it can be quite difficult to vary the pressure. You can mimic this though by working back over the top of lines in areas that you want to be darker. This tends to help making objects look as if they are kind of faking the idea of pressure. You could choose to adjust the size of the pattern that you're using as well. And you could choose to adjust the proximity, so how close one of them are to one another. Okay, so you've got pressure, you've got the amount of them, you've got how close they are together, and you have the size of them. So with that in mind, what we're going to do now with the pattern is, looking at our rectangle, we're going to apply that. And as we move from the dark side of the rectangle to the light, I'm going to use those suggestions to try and alter the way in which this looks. In the dark section, I'm going to have lots of the pattern close together to try and mimic the effect of a tonal bar showing a dark area. As I move to the middle area, or the lighter section as I go through, then I'm going to start moving those further apart, or having slightly less of them to showcase that the area is getting lighter. And then finally, for the light box, where most of the light would be hitting the object, all I'm going to do is spread them out even further, have even less of them, or maybe even adjust the size and make them even smaller. Now, we've moved from the idea of just copying a pattern and putting it into a box to try and practice the effect of doing it. We have chosen to try and apply that pattern now as a tonal gradient, so to take that simple thing that we have started with and to put a concept behind it, looking at the idea of darks and lights and how that may impact the pattern that we're looking at. The very last thing now is to have a practical application for it, so a real world opportunity for us to test what we have learned so far. So, the final stage of this now is to look at the idea of exploring a 3D shape or a form, for example like a cube or a pyramid, a cylinder, a cone, and to try and apply what we have learnt over that by figuring out where the light parts are, where the dark parts are, and to try and translate what we have learnt so far into an actual 3D object. Okay, so first of all, what I need to do is I need to start by actually drawing my object. So what I'm going to start with here is a really simple cube, okay? So I have my simple cube, and what I have to try and imagine is that somewhere around about up here, let's draw on a happy sun as a point of reference. We have a happy sun who is staring down at our object and providing light to it. Let's imagine that with where the sun is, if there's a little bit of depth off the page itself, that the majority of the sunlight is hitting this side. So this is in essence our lightest side. There's a little bit of sunlight which is hitting this one, so it's more of our medium side. And finally, there is no light able to get back here. So we have our darker side. Okay, now that's great, but how does it help us understand shading? Well, if I revisit over here for a second, what you'll notice is, say for example, if I look at these ones where I've already pre-drawn the spaces between, that hey, I have a box which represents dark, I have a box that represents medium, and I have a box that represents light. So, I wonder if I could just substitute in what I've put here in here. Well, let's have a look and see how it works. Let's start with dark. Now, is this realistic? No, it's not. You're not going to go outside and see a cube that has this kind of shading or tone on it in the real world. You might find a box that has this kind of pattern on it, but it allows you to understand the concept of shading and to demonstrate your understanding of that concept, even if you don't feel confident enough to do the traditional method of shading. So what I would recommend is this. If you are new to visual arts or you want to build up your shading ability, start by doing this as well as practicing to do traditional shading, because this allows you to understand the idea of the theory, and this will allow you to practice methods of shading in a much quicker manner. Say for example, if you want to start by looking at 3D objects, you find a reference point or you find some 3D objects in front of you. Start practicing drawing them and use the patterns to apply where the tonal areas would be, so you can see that subtle transition between when things start to get dark and things start to get light. Because more often than not, it's not as easy as having a dark side, a medium side, and a light side. What actually tends to happen is, you get some medium in your dark, and you get some dark in a little bit of the medium, and some medium bleeds over to the light areas as well. So you do get a little bit more complex than this. However, this would be a really good first step for you if you're kind of dipping your toe into the aspect of how to shade. Hopefully this has helped you understand a little bit more about shading and to use patterns and to try and create tonal gradients using those patterns and to then translate it into real world application of using it on 3D objects. Keep practicing this, especially if you're new to shading. Use this as an additional tool that you can gain a bit of confidence with whilst you are learning to shade, and I will see you soon. Take care, stay safe.